Hello from Joan's Kitchen. I'm Joan Qualls from Tasteful Voyages, and today, in honor of Hanukkah, which is starting in a few days, I'm going to be demonstrating how to make potato pancakes, or latkes, and I actually pulled out this apron that's from the Royal Order of the Latke Makers. Hanukkah is really a minor holiday in Jewish tradition. It celebrates the miracle of the lamp where the oil lasted for 8 days when it should have only lasted for one. This had to do with the rebuilding of the temple, and I think it's gotten more significant here in the U.S. because of its proximity to Christmas time, which is, as we know, a very big holiday here in the States, and Hanukkah is one of those holidays that moves around depending on the calendar. This year it's going to be starting on December 8th. And because it celebrates the miracle of the lamp, the oil lamp lasting for 8 days when it should have only lasted one, there are food treats that are consumed during Hanukkah that have to do with oil. Potato pancakes is one of the tastiest and favorite recipes that is cooked in oil. One of the other ones is a kind of a donut that's made during this time, which is also deep fried. I've made a lot of potato pancakes in my life, and I'm always searching for the perfect recipe. In fact, at my temple in Chicago, I used to be part of what was called the Latke Brigade. One of the activities that we had in the Sunday school was that every year the Sunday school students would make homemade Hanukkiah, or the menorah that are used for Hanukkah. And on the Sunday night during Hanukkah, there would be a big family dinner, which was pretty much just potato pancakes. I think maybe there was some brisket and chicken there too. But I was one of the team that would spend the whole day on Sunday cooking latkes for up to, I don't know, 150 or 200 people. And honestly, it would take days to wash the aroma of the potato pancakes out of my hair. It was always a fun event. There were maybe 8 or 10 of us who were there consistently year after year. The typical potato pancake recipe starts with shredded potatoes, which are then mixed with some shredded or grated onion, and a little bit of egg, and a little bit of flour or matzah meal, and then it's fried in oil. Part of the problem with that, it's a little bit hard to maintain the temperature of the oil correctly, and if the potatoes are raw, it's hard to cook them all the way without burning the outside but having the inside of the potatoes still being raw. So my very favorite version of this that I keep going back to is from this cookbook that's called Still Life with Vegetables, written by Molly Katzen, who's one of my favorite cookbook authors. She wrote the Moosewood cookbook probably around 1970, which was a collection of vegetarian recipes from the Moosewood restaurant, which I believe was somewhere in New York. And she has a technique that I really like, where you take the potatoes and you grate them, and then you parboil the shredded potatoes for about 5 minutes. So that takes care of the raw taste of the potatoes, and it also prevents the potato pancake batter from turning kind of like this reddish brown color as the potatoes oxidize. So for potato pancakes, for a basic recipe, you need potatoes. I use russet potatoes or baking potatoes. You need onion. For this particular recipe, the potato to onion recipe is this. It's like 2 big potatoes for 1 onion. You need a couple of eggs, and you need a little bit of flour, and then you need oil to boil them in. Again, back in the day, or if you didn't have a food processor, you would grate the potatoes by hand using a box grater. And it's not unusual for people to kind of scrape their knuckles when they're grating the potatoes. And it always reminds me of a Sanford and Son episode where Grady was making some kind of barbecue sauce and cut his finger, and that was the secret sauce that was in his sauce. A little gross, but anyway, since the advent of the food processor, it's much easier and faster to grate the potatoes in a food processor rather than by hand, and that's what I do. And I've actually gone ahead and done that ahead of time. I've prepared my batter ahead of time. So I took 2 potatoes. They fit in the feed tube of my food processor whole, so I kind of put them in slanted and grated them, and then I dropped them in the boiling water that I had going for about 5 minutes. I then took my onion, cut it into about 8 pieces, and chopped it with the blade until it was kind of pulverized. The pieces were a little bit smaller than grains of rice, I would say. Then I mixed in my eggs and my flour, and what I have here is my batter that I've pre-made. And as you can see, it has just basically a raw potato color. It's a little bit yellower because of the eggs that are mixed in there. And there's also a little bit of salt and pepper that's mixed in there. I like this recipe not only because it's pre-cooked, but I also like that it has a lot of onion in it, which to me makes it very flavorful. One of the advantages with this recipe with the potatoes being pre-cooked is then when you're cooking them, you can kind of press them down to make them flatter, and that actually helps them cook a little bit faster. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I've got my oil heated up. One other thing is typically these are deep fried. This particular recipe calls for just having a few tablespoons of oil in the bottom of the pan and then changing the oil after each batch of potato pancakes that you make. And you want the oil to be really hot, and I don't know if you can hear it, but when I put that pancake in there, it's making kind of like a sputtering sound, and that's exactly what you want. And I'm hoping, since I'm doing these live, that they are not going to stick to the bottom of the pan. While you're making the potato pancakes, you typically have little pieces of the potato and the onion that are going to break off and start floating around in the pan. And those are actually called grimanis or grimanis. It's just like the little bits of potato and onion that are broken off. And people like to scoop those out with a slotted spoon and actually snack on those as they're making the potato pancakes. The traditional accompaniments for potato pancakes include sour cream and applesauce. Again, in this Still Life with Menu cookbook from Molly Katzen, she has a fabulous recipe for a 3-fruit sauce that goes along with this. It's very simple and very delicious, and it doesn't have any added sugar. You take a pineapple, peel it, core it, and cut it into chunks, and a handful of apples and a handful of pears, and you stew that all together in a pan with a lid on it with a couple of cinnamon sticks. So you get a very intense fruit flavor. The fruit kind of breaks down and melds into each other as it's cooking, and then you also get the really lovely flavor from cinnamon, and you don't add any sugar, and the fruit is definitely sweet enough on its own. When you are getting ready to turn the pancakes, one of the people in our Latke brigade at the temple was the rabbi at that time and his wife, and she taught me the 2-fork method, and it's actually, for me, the easiest way to turn the pancakes. For me, if you're trying to turn them with a spatula and get under them, a lot of times it's just hard to manage it without spattering hot oil all over yourself, which is something that you really don't want to do. So the 2 forks method, you take 1 fork and you're kind of lifting it under the pancake, and the other one to guide it. This is a little bit soft. I think it's not quite ready to turn yet. Let me see how this one is doing. Turn this around a little bit. So one of the other recipes that's included in this section of the book is for something that's kind of like a ratatouille, and I'm not a big fan of zucchini and green pepper, which is a traditional ratatouille. This particular ratatouille has eggplant and olives in it, and it's absolutely delicious. It's a really nice side dish to have with this. In the book, it's called a Tunisian eggplant appetizer. So when I publish the recipe for the potato pancakes, I am going to include the recipe for the 3-fruit sauce and the Tunisian eggplant appetizer, and that would actually be an entire vegetarian meal for you there. The Tunisian eggplant appetizer is seasoned with some tomato paste and a little bit of vinegar, so you get a little bit of almost like a sweet and sour flavor from it. It's a very intense flavor, and it really is better if you let it stand for a couple of days even before eating it. The flavors really deepen. Potato pancakes are not limited to Jewish cuisine or Israeli cuisine. There's also potato pancakes in Germany. The potato pancakes in Germany are made a little bit different. The potatoes are almost like ground, like into a meal, and the batter tends to look much more like a traditional pancake batter, where it's more pourable. The shreds of the potatoes are not typically visible in that. So your potato pancake comes out like more of a doughy texture. There's also a dish in Switzerland that's called rosti, which is basically shredded potatoes that are put in a pan with oil on the bottom and just left to cook in one big piece. So you can also do a potato pancake like that instead of doing individual pancakes like what I'm doing right now. And do one and then cut it into wedges and serve it, kind of how you would serve a cake or a pie. I mentioned that I'm always searching for the perfect recipe for potato pancakes. There was a recipe that was published last week in the New York Times, which called for taking potatoes and baking them almost all the way through, but having them still be raw in the middle, cutting them in half, and then grating the almost baked potato by hand, and then taking the baked potato kind of pulp that you got, just mixing it with a little salt and pepper, flattening it with your hand into a pancake shape, chilling it and frying it. And I was actually thinking about making those here on my little cooking episode today, but I tried them yesterday and they just had no flavor at all. I ended up taking the mashed potatoes and mixing some eggs and onion and flour into them and making a more traditional batter just so that they would have some taste. So I'm back to my standard recipe from Latkes and for Hanukkah for this year. And my first one here is almost done. So I'm going to go ahead and use my 2 forks to pull it out and show you what that looks like. And it's going to break apart a little bit, but you can see it has like a nice golden brown color. It's definitely cooked all the way through because the potatoes were par-cooked in the beginning. And I've got a cookie sheet here with some paper towels on it that I'm going to drain this on. If you have any questions about what I've done, please go ahead and put a comment into the comment section, and I will do my very best to answer you. If you have any questions about travel during the pandemic, I would love to help you out with that. I'm keeping abreast of the news, and I, like so many people, am really looking forward to when we can travel again. I'm hopeful with the vaccine news that perhaps we'll be able to travel again sometime next year. But I'm waiting, I'm patient. We're very fortunate that we live in a beautiful place and that we're healthy and our family is healthy. So even though it's a little bit frustrating not to be able to do everything that we want to do, I think the most important thing for us to do is just stay safe and keep others safe as well, and cook at home. And that's why I've been doing these little cooking Facebook Live events, and I hope that you are enjoying these. If you have missed any, I have a YouTube channel. It's just Joan McGee Qualls on YouTube, spelling out each of my names. And I've put all of my previous little cooking episodes there on the YouTube channel. And there are links in there to get the recipes if you like. Of course, I also hope that you might subscribe to my newsletter. There's a link in there for subscribing to the newsletter as well. And I think that's going to do it for today. So ciao for now. I'll see you again soon from Joan's Kitchen. Bye-bye.